Okay, so I'm not going to spend too much time on mitosis and meiosis. But remember that all cells in your body right now, many of them are undergoing mitosis. They're dividing in your body to make an identical uh, daughter cell, right? So, for example, in your gastrointestinal tract right now, you have active mitosis to make identical cells to maintain the gastrointestinal lining because it's constantly being shed. And that would go to that would apply to many rapidly dividing cells in your body. So whether we talk about the cells within your mouth or the gastrointestinal tract, the cells of your thyroid gland, breast tissue, uh, there's many cells that are constantly rapidly dividing and they want to make an identical cell and they go through the process of mitosis. So if you look on the left here, the initial cell on the left and the final two cells on the right, the process of mitosis is to make two identical cells um, that have the same genetic information as the original cell on the left. Okay, so let's talk a bit about meiosis, and then we'll go to the next slide that has an image of mitosis and meiosis. Okay, so meiosis is the process um, within sperm or eggs that allow them to have half the chromosomal information um, of, um, of a cell. Okay, so and we call them gametes. So a sperm or an egg. Okay, and they go through a process of division that then results in four uh, separate cells, and they will have half the information within them, so that when they combine with a sperm, or if the sperm combines with an egg, you have you have complete chromosomal information. Okay, so meiosis is not always happening in all of your cells of your body, like when I spoke about mitosis, because we wouldn't want to have our cells only to have half the information. So meiosis is allowing gametes, which are sperms and eggs, to have half the information for when they combine um, during fertilization. Okay. Okay, so on the left we have mitosis. Okay, again, which is happening all over your body right now, producing two identical cells. Right? So you had the parent cell. Let's say we're talking about a cell within the mucosa of your mouth. Okay, it wants to divide. It makes two identical cells. So initially the DNA replicates and then it divides. If you look at the two daughter cells, they're identical to the above parent cell. Okay, what about meiosis? Well, meiosis is the process of having half the information at the bottom. So again, the DNA replicates first, and then it divides into two daughter cells. Okay, everything seems pretty similar so far to mitosis. But then it divides into four daughter cells, and each one of those has half the information. Okay? Okay, so we'll just do these questions together. Tell whether the following statement is true or false. A is true, B is false. So mitosis results in the formation of gametes, which are the reproductive cells. And that would be false, right? Meiosis results in the formation of gametes. Mitosis is a process that's occurring basically in all other cells of the body to have identical cells uh, replace them, right? Because remember, cells undergo apoptosis. Cells die after a while. They have programmed death. So cells are constantly undergoing mitosis to maintain the cells of any particular area of your body. Okay, so let's look inside what should be in every nucleus of every cell of your body. You should have 23 pairs of human chromosomes, okay, within the nucleus. And you acquired half of the chromosomes from your mother, and you acquired half of the chromosomes from your father, okay? And we have broken up the chromosomes. We've numbered them, so we can actually see these with very powerful microscopes, and we can identify the different chromosomes. Okay, and remember, all of the chromosomes in the human genome have been coded for, and they've been sequenced, right, in scientific labs. So we have 22 pairs of autosomal chromosomes, and we have one pair of a sex chromosome. So at the bottom right, you could have XY, which is a male, or XX, which is a female. Okay? So 23 pairs of chromosomes, 22, we call them autosomal chromosomes, and they would code for an assortment of different characteristics of the person. Okay? Endless characteristics, the bone structure, the coloring of the skin, the tissue type that you have, the shape of your arms, the shape of your head, everything is coded from the chromosomes. And we're going to see what happens when there's defects in either the autosomal chromosomes or the sex chromosomes. Okay? Because depending on what's been damaged or missing is going to then translate into the appearance or the defects in the patient or in the person. Okay? And we'll come to that. So just know 22 autosomal and one pair of sex chromosomes. Okay, so this is actually showing you staining of chromosomes. Okay, so and it's showing you the pairs of autosomal chromosomes, and then finally at the bottom right, a sex chromosome. In this case, it's XY. Notice how small the Y chromosome is. It's a it's a very sensitive chromosome. In actual fact, there's concern as pollution um, uh, develops more and more in the world, what's going to happen to the Y chromosome? Because it's a relatively sensitive chromosome to its environment. Okay, so we'll see what happens there. Anyway, so this is a male, right? XY. So we're able to see under a powerful microscope the overall structure of the different chromosomes, the 22 autosomal and the one sex chromosome. And remember, through studying these chromosomes, we're able to determine where different genetic conditions come from, right? And that's taken many, many years. So, for example, a genetic condition could come from chromosome 10, and then they'll look closely at chromosome 10 and see where the defect is within chromosome 10. Okay? Sometimes genetic defects come from multiple chromosomes, not just one isolated chromosome. So it will be potentially chromosomes 3 and 12 and 18 have defects in them that's causing this inheritance of a particular disease. So it's a pretty amazing part um, of science to know the genetic information and also how it then codes for many, many different types of proteins. Okay, and we're going to go through genetic inheritance patterns coming up. So the above slide and this slide actually showed you a karyotype. Okay, so what's a karyotype? Well, it's just an image of a patient's or an individual's chromosomes, right? So they're isolated, they're stained, and then they're looked under with a very powerful microscope, and you can see the shape of them, you can count the numbers of them, and people that are specialized in genetics can identify structural abnormalities, if there's major structural abnormalities on a karyotype. Okay, let's go through this a bit more slowly because alleles, genotypes, and phenotypes are going to become important as we go through um, the module. Okay, so what's a gene? Well, we already spoke about that a bit, but it's a segment of DNA which is on the chromosome, which is in uh, the nucleus that codes for a particular protein, right? And that protein can do one of 1,000 different functions, but the gene is the DNA segment that codes for it. Okay. All right. What's an allele? So at a particular site that has gene coding, we'll call it an allele. So there's different forms of a gene at a particular site. And depending on the version um, of the allele, it will code for a particular protein, which will then give information for a particular trait in the person. Okay, so the genotype is just telling you the set of alleles that are present at a particular site on the chromosome. Okay, so it's the genetic information of a particular site. Okay, so your genotype, if you would look at it overall, is fixed. You can't change your genotype. Okay, so what's the phenotype? Well, the phenotype is the observable physical traits that are produced by the actions of all these different genes that are being coded or being copied, and then proteins are being produced. Okay, so let's do that again. So a gene is a particular segment of DNA. Okay, what's an allele? It's just different forms of the gene in different people. So someone with blonde hair will have a different allele than someone with brown hair. Okay, so it's just a different version of the gene. Okay, your genotype is basically all the sets of alleles throughout your entire chromosomes. Okay. Okay, what's a phenotype? That is, what does the person look like? That's the physical traits that have occurred by the actions of all of these genes. Okay, so remember, give yourself a chance to go through these slides once and not try and really stick to one term without getting an overall general idea. Okay, because we're using definitions here, so go through the information first, and then if something didn't make sense, come back to it. Okay, so gene characteristics. What's a gene? It's a segment of DNA that's coding for a particular protein. Okay, gene penetrance. So what's the chance that a particular gene will be expressed as the phenotype? So as the trait that's now seen in the person. That's the penetrance. Expressivity is how strongly a gene, or if we're talking about a certain location, a certain area, the allele, is expressed as the phenotype. Okay? So the phenotype is always the physical traits. Like how big are your feet? How big are your hands? All those things are phenotypes. Okay? What's a locus? A locus is just a defined area of, uh, of, of where the gene is on a particular chromosome. That's a locus. What's an allele? Well, an allele is basically the gene segment, which is at a particular area on the chromosome. We'll call it a locus. And you have two alleles. You have one from your mother and you have one from your father. And that's why penetrance and expressivity are going to become important, because you have an allele from your mother and you have an allele from your father. Okay? What's polygenic? Well, most of our traits are from multiple genes. We are going to talk about diseases that come from a single allele defect or a single gene defect. But for the most part, most of our traits are polygenic. They come from multiple areas of, of the same chromosome or multiple areas of different chromosomes. Okay, so for example, your overall appearance is coming from a huge assortment of different alleles on different chromosomes. Okay, so the vast majority of our inheritance is polygenic. So you can imagine that someone might say, well, you look a bit similar to your mom, or you look a bit similar to your father. Okay, a bit similar. So there was a bit of predictability there. That's polygenic. Similar, maybe a bit predictable, but nothing definite at all. But we're also going to talk about single gene defects, okay? Or single allele defects, which is going to then lead to a very predictable disease. Okay, and we'll come to that. Okay, so let's just stop and go through some chromosomal and gene facts. Okay, so chromosomes carry all genetic information of the cell. That's true. So every cell in your body has the identical chromosomes. Okay, why do we have different shapes of cells? Why do we have different organs? It's not because the cells have different chromosomes. It's because different parts of the chromosomes have been activated to turn on and to produce particular types of proteins. And that's why your liver cells are different than your kidney cells. They have the identical chromosomal information. Okay? Chromosomes exist in matching pairs. That's true. One from your mother and one from your father, right? So matching pairs, 22 pairs of autosomal, one pair of a sex chromosome. So each autosomal pair, you've acquired one of them from your mother and one of them from your father. Same with the sex chromosome pair, right? From your mother, you were given an X chromosome. From your father, you were given either an X chromosome or a Y chromosome, which then determined whether you were male or female. Okay. So 2 genes are inherited for every human trait. Okay. That's true because you have an allele on the chromosome that you got from your mother, and you have an allele on a certain location from the chromosome from your father. Okay, and they are arranged in pairs. The chromosomes are arranged in pairs, one from your mother and one from your father. So 22 pairs of chromosomes are autosomal, and that doesn't determine your sex at all. And the 23rd pair is the sex chromosome, an XX, so an X chromosome from your mother, X chromosome from your father, determines female sex, X chromosome from your mother, Y chromosome from your father, determines male sex. Okay, so let's continue on with some chromosomal and gene facts. So all human characteristics and qualities are derived from the hundreds and hundreds of genes that are within the genome, meaning your 23 pairs of chromosomes. Okay, that's for sure. 2 genes are located at each loci on the paired chromosome. Okay, so that's when we're talking about alleles, right? So at every location on a particular chromosome, we'll call it a loci, there'll be a corresponding one on the paired chromosome. So you have a gene segment from your mother and a gene segment from your father at every location of every chromosome. And we're going to end up calling them alleles. Okay, so let's go to the third statement. An allele is the individual gene from each parent. So there's 2 alleles at each gene loci. So if you look at those chromosomal pairs and you look at one little tiny strand, one little segment of a chromosome, you're going to have an allele from your mother on one chromosome and an allele from your father on the paired chromosome beside it. Okay? Okay, now if the alleles are identical, meaning the gene from your mother and the gene from your father is identical, then you are homozygous. Okay, you have homozygous alleles. Okay, and this is going to come into play when we're talking about inheritance patterns. Okay, so this might determine the color of your eyes, the color of your hair, and many other traits. So just know that homozygous alleles are identical. Okay, so continuing on with that same concept. So at a particular location or loci on a pair of chromosomes, so one chromosome from your mother and one chromosome from your father. Let's use chromosome 5 as an example. You have alleles that are in the corresponding locations of your mother's chromosome and your father's chromosome. If they're heterozygous, it means that the alleles are different. Okay, they're not identical to each other, and that's fine. It's going to determine characteristics since they're different, just like homozygous alleles would determine characteristics since they're the same. Okay, so you have 2 alleles. Okay, so an allele can be dominant, and if it's dominant, you only need one of them from one parent, and you express the trait that that allele is coding for. Okay? So, for example, if we're talking about the alleles that are coding for eye color, well, blue eyes are recessive. So you would need both alleles to code for blue eyes. Okay? So you would need both alleles, one from your mother, one from your father, to both have the genetic information for blue eyes. Okay, let's just go back to an allele can be dominant. Okay, what about brown eyes? Well, brown eyes only needs one allele. So if you got the allele from your father for brown eyes, and you got an allele from your mother for blue eyes, you're going to have brown eyes, okay? Because brown eyes are dominant over blue eyes, okay? It only needed one allele. Let's go to the bottom statement. An allele can be recessive. And in order for that allele to be expressed as a trait, you have to have the recessive allele from both of your parents. Let's go back to eye color. So from your mother, you were given the allele for blue eyes. From your father, you were given the allele now for blue eyes. Okay, so now you will have blue eyes because that's what it takes to have blue eyes. You have to have the allele for this particular recessive trait from your mother and the allele for this recessive trait, meaning blue eyes, from your father. And that's what we mean by recessive. You need both alleles to have to be coding for that recessive trait. Okay, so let's revisit these terms, genotype and phenotype. So your genotype is basically your genetic makeup. So the genetic material that you acquired from your mother and your father. And really, it's defined as the 23 chromosomes that you got from your mother and the 23 chromosomes that you got from your father. And on all those chromosomes are the gene locations, the gene loci, and they are sets of alleles. So at every gene location, you'll have an allele, which is a segment of genetic information that is from your mother, and one that is on the other chromosome from your father, right? If the alleles are identical, they're homozygous. If the alleles are different, they're heterozygous. Okay? And so this genetic material is not alterable, it's fixed. You have your genetic material for life in every cell of your body, right? And specific genes on different chromosomes are responsible for different physical traits, which is your phenotype, by the way, the physical trait. So your height, your color, your body shape, your personality, that's determined by your genotype, and we call those traits, such as height, color, body shape, and personality, your phenotype. Okay? So let's use an example of eye color. So eye color tends to be from a particular gene location. It's not really polygenic like many other traits, such as the shape of your nose, your height, your body trait, your personality. Let's just look at eye color for a minute. So eye color has a recessive color, which is brown, and a dominant color, which is brown, and a recessive color, which is blue. Okay, what if your mother gave you the allele for blue eyes, and your father gave you the allele for brown eyes? Well, you're going to have brown eyes. right? Because the allele for brown eyes is dominant. So it's going to express itself more as the phenotype. Let's look at a different scenario. What if your mother gave you the allele for blue eyes and your father gave you the allele for blue eyes? Well, then you're going to have blue eyes, right? Because in order to have a recessive gene express itself as the phenotype, both alleles have to be there. So you need to have homozygous recessive alleles. Okay? Whereas in the example of a dominant allele, such as brown eyes, you only needed one of them. So it could be heterozygous, right? You had the brown allele from your father, and the blue allele from your mother. Well, they're different alleles. So you're heterozygous, and you have brown eyes. Okay, we'll get into this more and more as we start talking about other conditions. Okay, but know what a genotype is and know what a phenotype is. The phenotype is just what do you look like? What are the physical traits you're actually expressing? Okay, this slide is just showing you genotype. Okay, so two examples of genotype DNA. Okay, so your genotype for the DNA for your thumbprint, okay, is um, is a segment of DNA, and it makes a particular type of thumbprint. That's the phenotype. The genotype for how tall or how short you are, okay, that's in your DNA. That's going to be a polygenic trait, meaning different parts of different chromosomes will influence your overall height, which is your phenotype.